Broadcasting from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, to around the globe. You're listening to Shark Bite Biz, your exclusive place for business strategy, sales, marketing, and tech in the roaring 20s. And now, here's your host, David Strausser.
Welcome to another rocket episode of Shark Bite Biz. I'm your all-star host, David Strausser, and this is your place to learn how to grow a business during a global pandemic. So we have a great episode in store for today, and it is all about sales. How do you sell during a pandemic? How has the sales process changed? What do you have to do differently in order to succeed and close deals? It's all new territory for everybody, and if you're like us, you're pretty much learning on the go. Many people are struggling closing deals right now. We have had to adjust to doing things remotely. Not just doing things remotely, but also tracking down people. As even till this day, a lot of office extensions do not work. That could be because the people were laid off, furloughed, or because they have an antiquated tech system at their office and they're unable to forward those calls to phone numbers. A lot of various reasons, but it's hard. I mean, if you're dialing for dollars right now, I do not want to be you. So we're in a time period, though, of rebranding and innovation, a time in which you should be reevaluating how you do business and every aspect of your business down to and including your actual sales cycle. People are more comfortable doing things digitally now. That's the one good thing that came out of this pandemic. The aspect of, you've got to close a deal in person, for the most part, that's out the window. I mean, but we did hear exceptions, like Sandro Pianconi with the hemp industry. With what he does, yeah, I guess you've got to do it in person. But with what I do, for example, so my industry with Vision33, we sell projects valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even millions. And we're doing that right now without even ever meeting the people personally. It's all through a video chat, just like I'm doing right now, talking to you through YouTube. Same exact thing. We do discovery remote. We do demos remote. We're doing the full-blown implementations remotely. It is the world we live in, and you have to be able to adjust, to pivot, to move forward in order to survive. Today's guest is going to discuss just that. In fact, he is actually from my day job, my main gig over at Vision33, and he is one of our top sales reps. He's a great, personable guy, and his name, Jeff Strand. Jeff has a background in sales and technology going back 25 years, covering everything from the early days of PPC advertising to cutting-edge hardware, and the past 16 years in the CRM and ERP space. With a focus on relationships with customers rather than just a sale, no matter what industry or service, Jeff has been successful in selling. The top salesperson in multiple companies to be continually successful with his current employer, Vision33. Jeff is a graduate of the University of Washington, born, raised, and resides in the Pacific Northwest, where he pursues his hobbies of biking, swimming, collecting wine, and of course, selling. So let's bring Jeff on in here.
Make the sale.
Hey, Jeff, welcome to Shark Bite Biz. We're so glad to have you here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. So obviously, I know who you are. I know who you are really, really well because in full disclosure, we both work at Vision33. But for all of our audience out there, the viewers, listeners, wherever they are, explain, what's your background, your experience? What are you a subject matter expert in?
Subject matter expert. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So my background really starts in sales going back to around, oh goodness gracious, almost my adult life. I was in retail sales doing electronics and cell phones. back at back in sort of the mid to late 90s.
Back when you
Decided to go
needed
back
a
to
degree for cell phone sales.
back when I needed it. Yeah, back when selling cell phones was actually very difficult to do.
Right.
A funny story about that and sort of just how things have changed so much. It was Christmas time and I was selling cell phones in Bellevue, Washington.
Yeah.
And I was with a company that was essentially purchased by Best Buy, I don't know, 20 years ago. But at the time, it was this up and coming startup or this upcoming retail company. And we had people coming in to buy cell phones, and it was just like Christmas time, and there was no stopping them. So you had people coming in, there'd be a lineup. I would just grab somebody, make them fill out a paper application, fill in some stuff, throw in some information on the phone, fax it in to AT&T at the time, and then would send them out the door. And I mean, they were making, oh my goodness, it was crazy. It was hand over fist amount of dollars, but this was just sort of this process from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. at night every day, basically for 2.5, 3 weeks straight.
Wow.
So that was my introduction to sales. I wish it was like that sometimes now, but so yeah, that was kind of the first of it. I ended up getting into hardware technology, and that's kind of what started my run towards where I'm at now. And that was a little bit more business to business with a company that was going to be this, next big startup back in the heyday of 2000 through 2003, 2004. And we burned through $550 million in funding in about 4.5 years, primarily through Lucent, but a number of other companies. And that was the great time of, everybody had an on-site massage therapist in their offices. And, it was like food carts everywhere. So it was quite the adventure. And I was there basically till they pulled the plug and sold the company, and the lights were turned off. And I went from there to another company that was involved with software, and that started kind of my software run in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. Was there for a couple of 3 years, selling message board software, and that was unique. Had its own sorts of challenges, right? So, but was there for kind of the growth of that, and then went to another startup that was competing with Salesforce, and was their top salesperson for 3 years. Until the CEO and the CFO were indicted on wire fraud and funneling funds from the investment firm that was handling sort of the startup nature of it. And
you've really been on a ride, man. That's that's great.
Oh yes, yeah. We came into work one day and they said, I'll leave the names out of it, but they said the CEO and the CFO have been arrested and are currently being processed for wire fraud. And we were like, what? Of course, what we heard from the investment firm was that all business will continue.
Yeah.
We have a roadmap, a strategy going forward. And I think we lasted maybe another month before we were, shuttled into one of the office rooms, and they said, the 50 of you that are in here, you can turn in your badges and your laptops. We are shutting the company down.
Wow. So
they did this 3 or 4 rounds. Yeah.
You have a history of writing it out to the very end with companies, it seems like.
Yeah. And I don't know if I've learned a lot from that. I've learned sort of, I think the nature of how I handle sales now and how I handle sort of working at the company we both work at. I've become much more loyal in a way to companies that I've found that have worked very well for me.
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you were going on the heyday of hardware, software, message boards. Yeah. I'm never going to let you live the message board one down, man. That's funny.
No. If I keep count of this, I think it was 1, 2. Actually, there was a company I worked at between that startup that went out of business and currently Vision33. There was a company in the middle there that I was with for a year not even a year, maybe 6 months until I started here with Vision33 that I think lasted. I was there for basically about a year, I guess it was. And they were an ERP CRM company, and they went out of business. So
Wow.
If I count in let's call it the last 20 years, that's probably 3 companies that I've worked for that's gone out of business that were sort of startup in nature.
Yeah. But luckily Vision took a chance with you, and you've been there for what, 10 years? You've been there for a long time.
Yeah, it's 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty rare these days, I think, especially for salespeople. I mean, they usually get the bug probably 2, 3, 4 years, and they move. Yeah. And that's one thing I like about Vision is just, they kind of have the loyalty, it seems, going both ways. And I think that's really rare for most employers today.
Yeah, I think that's what's kind of kept me here in some aspects. Obviously, my boss, who is a great man, and I've been fortunate to work for him and have a great relationship with him and just be able to be honest with him. Mm-hmm. But I think that is true. I sort of look at software as, every year is like, 2 dog years. So it's sort of like every year in software is like 14 years in real life. So, the nature of the industry is to be somewhere and then you don't make a number for a couple months and you're out the door. And I find that is just absolutely horrible to have to go through. I've seen it many, many times, and to be on the backside of it. It's a challenge that nobody really wants to go through in any industry that you're in. Sales specifically, I think we all kind of relate to that.
And that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on. I brought you on not because we both work at Vision33, but I brought you on because I know you, I know your sales ability. I knew some of your background as far as coming up in sales. And on this show, we really like to highlight a couple different things. One, the individual, who is Jeff? What can people learn from you as a person? Sure. But 2, I wanted you to bring in here because ERP, tech, doesn't matter what you're selling right now. It's a rapidly evolving world, and we have new challenges in the sales world that I really wanted to talk to somebody about to kind of see how you're changing, adopting, pivoting to make this all work. So, what? First off, let's start at a high level. What are you seeing out there as far as some trends that companies are facing, and then how you're trying to meet those needs for those companies right now?
Sure. I think a lot of what we see is sort of this perspective from a customer, from an employer, from a business is, how do I maintain my customers, let alone try to just get new customers in the door? So we're starting to see, at least I'm starting to see this trend where businesses are trying to secure the customers they have through technology. And so what we're seeing is sort of the adoption of different ways the businesses can communicate without sort of the day-to-day phone call interactions that they might have.
Right.
It's hard enough to figure out where, who to call, where to call. If you call into a business, where is it being routed to? Are people here? Are they there?
Did the company reroute the office lines to the cell phones for the work from home people? That's a struggle right now. It's hard to get if you're calling office phones, it's sometimes hard to get in touch with people because the companies don't have the right system set up that will allow them to forward the calls.
Yeah, and you could be calling someone and it could end up going to, by chance you're looking for Mike and you end up with Debbie, and Debbie's in a completely different part, in a completely different aspect of the business. And they're like, I don't know. I'm just getting phone calls.
Who's Mike?
I'm not quite sure.
He's furloughed.
Yeah, who's Mike, right?
Right.
Exactly. So, that aspect is troublesome, but it's just the relationship that you as a business have with your customer. How do you maintain that? How do you interact with that? And so what we're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, is businesses are trying different things. For example, portals to maintain the relationship with their customers, making it easier for their customers to be able to get to interact with them. So, I have a customer, I want them to be able to communicate with me. How do I, what phone number do they call? Well, instead, let's send them to some sort of a portal where they can self-service their business needs, interact directly with us via this electronic method.
Now,
I think that's a lot more of what we're starting to see.
right. What I'm thinking though too, and again, I'm thinking of this in terms of what I deal with my daily life with Vision33, is that there's a huge difference though between like a base customer, a customer that you have already acquired, could be 3 months, it could be 30 years that you've had this customer, and continuing that relationship compared to
Sure.
a brand new customer or
Right.
a prospect that you're trying to bring on.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have an episode that is going to publish right now with Todd Silligram. It's tomorrow's episode, actually, so that dates when we're recording this. But with that, he says, hey, my biggest struggle, because he has a entertainment tech startup for this awesome video technology, is I can't network. There's only so much I could do over a Zoom call.
Right.
And it's hard to build a
Correct.
relationship off of Zoom calls. I mean, do you run into that barrier at all? Is it a barrier?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much a barrier. I see the point of not being able to network, right? The idea of, as we're both sitting here drinking coffee, the idea of being able to go and have a coffee side chat with somebody, that for the most part is, I think, out the door right now, unless you're in a geographic area that lends itself to that. Hey, I'm down the street. Let's go get a coffee at, the local coffee house. And yeah, we'll sit 6 feet apart or we'll sit outside, but we can at least communicate. A lot of that stuff, I think, is out the window for now. I don't see, maybe 2 years from now, we'll be back to that. But in terms of just the overall interaction with customers, I've actually found it to be much easier.
Why is that?
The business that I've been able to close has been more focused and I think more organized in terms of, yeah, we're socially distanced, but we know what we're here for. We have a purpose and we want to get something in place that allows us to expand our business. So there seems to be much more of this focused discussion or this focused energy as opposed to, well, yeah, we're not quite sure. Maybe we'll look at something. Maybe we won't. We're kind of kicking the tires. It seems to be, for me at least, people are like, yes, we're struggling. We need something now. We don't have a lot of time to kind of dilly-dally around. We want to get forward and get something done and get something purchased and get going.
Right.
That's what I've found. So I've actually think it's a little bit easier in terms of that direct, connection, that direct focus.
Right. So let me ask a question. When you sold pre-pandemic, were you doing mostly remote sales or were you doing in person? When I was selling in LA, I was 99% of the time, I was going to be 90% of the meetings in person because locality, it was easy for me to go. What about you?
Yeah, it was probably 70-30 that I was on site. I would try to, group things together and do the, the road trip, but I'm going to schedule some stuff into Oregon. I'll do 3 or 4 appointments in Oregon. So, the at least part of the introductory process would be, a quick phone call with a prospect to kind of just get an assessment of what's going on with them. That second meeting was always in person and it was always much more focused. But I think in terms of the overall number of appointments that I've seen to get to a close of a transaction has gone down with a customer.
That's what I was getting to ask, because I was going to ask if now that you're doing everything, essentially, you're what, 99.99% remote, if not 100 right now?
Yeah.
Okay. If doing it digitally, if it's actually been a benefit because you do less touch points.
Yes, I would say so. And the focus of the emails, the focus of the conversation, even using things like text messaging, has become much more of a thing for me in terms of direct communication with my contacts and my prospects.
Okay. So now when you're talking with it, though, I mean, with a customer, I mean, a lot of people are in sales businesses where it's driven by quarter end close, maybe month end close, like say you sell cars or something like that. With that, has your attitude changed though, with these past 2 quarters being the end of quarter 1, end of quarter 2? Now we're at the end of quarter 3, as far as how hard you push. I mean, did that change at all?
Yeah, it actually hasn't. And I've never really, I think the last 4 or 5 years of my career, I've really sort of gone away from that end of quarter push.
Right.
What I think I've found is that, if I present a product that is compelling and it fits within the requirements, I've been able to explain what it is the product will do for them and how it will solve their needs. That whole, pressure of being out the door, I think has gone away. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it really doesn't lead to successful implementations, no matter what it is that you're doing, whether you're, selling a car or you are selling, real estate property or, some sort of technology. I don't think that push really does anything. I think it can frustrate the buyer. I think it leads for, poor communication. Ultimately, then it just looks as though we're trying to get a product out the door. And then when you go later on to engage with them.
I think it's a little cheesy. I mean, I've always felt like, your discounts are going to expire. Now, I think with us, we've seen that a little bit more, but that's because we do have some firm discounts from software publishers that they're like, hey, this is until. So we do have a little bit of that. That's true. But I think in normal times, customers kind of see through it. And the way that I've done it is I structured the deal by the customer's timeline. Like, hey, look, you say you want to be live by, I don't know, March 1st. Okay. To do that, this is the timeline everything needs to be done by, and we need to start the implementation process. And I just try to hold them accountable to that. And that's been successful. I mean, obviously, I build it around quarter ends or whatever we need, but I build that timeline with that in mind. I mean, what do you think of that approach? You think it's the same thing, or you think it's smoother?
I think each approach kind of works better for the person who's doing it. And my feeling on this is that you do things a little bit differently than I do. I do things much differently than other people do that I've seen kind of come and go.
That's a
great
point. So you
have to adapt what's best for you, right? So I would rather be much more open to the customer and say, hey, I've got this amount of room to work with. I will give you that room. But I'm not going to drop from that, and I'm not going to play a competitive price game of like, well, okay, you're just trying to shop me to get my price down. I'd rather just say, look, I'm open. Here's what it is. I want to get your product. I think it will work well for you. I'd rather have you cross all your, your T's and dot your I's. And whether that's, the 30th of November or the 1st of October, whatever date works for you, I want that to be the goal. I want you to be 100% ready, willing to go forward in this deal and start the process on your timeline, so that they don't come to me and say, well, we didn't really, you pushed me into this product and I didn't get quite all the discovery that I needed on it. And so now I'm like, it doesn't really work. And so there's always this, this push forward and then this pain on the backside. I'd rather get everything off the table to start with.
No,
if it's a timeline.
You bring up an extremely important point. And when I moved from LA to Philly to run our Northeast region out here, I mean, that was one of the first things that I personally had to accept. What works for me isn't going to work necessarily for my sales reps. Each person in sales, I mean, sales is a relationship game. And I think a lot what the individual has to do with it. And what works for me won't work for you. Maybe what works for me will work for you, but it's got to be modified for your personality as far as what you can actually do. And that's critical. I want to pivot a little bit as far as prospecting, finding.
Let me touch. Let me go back real quick on this. One quick thing.
Yeah.
So, my background, I think there's probably several people that watch this are very formally trained in sales. They've read the books, they've gone through the courses, they've done the Zig Ziglars, they've kind of gone through all these specific classes and to improve their stuff. I actually come from the process of, or the background of, I don't know if I've maybe read one sales book in my entire life. I've maybe done one course in my entire life. But everything I've learned in terms of sales, whether it's, software, hardware, even real estate, I have a background in real estate, always comes from the perspective of the relationship with a person and just being open kind and honest. Don't try to push things on people. Let them decide on their own times. I've always found that to be more successful. My wife had promised me when I was doing real estate and had my broker's license and stuff like that, and said, don't ever put, this was specific to, a certain group of buyers, but it was, don't ever put someone into a house that you wouldn't put your sister or family member into. Right. And so I looked at it and I go, I'm going to treat that person as a way I would treat
that's almost like the
someone in
golden
my family,
rule.
My sister. Yeah,
absolutely.
What is
it? Do unto others as
others as you would have done to you.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's an amazing point. I love that.
It's the same thing, and it's the same thing no matter, I think, whatever industry you're in, or just in general. There you go. There's my theology lesson.
No, that's great. And before I go on to that next topic, now I want to bring up something. I have never read any sales books or classes either. Sales has always been an art, a craft, and it's been about the personal connection. And it's just something I've discovered at a young age I was good at. Now, I have read 2 books. One was forced on me by someone who worked for Xerox in the 70s. And he's like, you've got to reach, what is it? I have it right here yet. It's Spin Selling. So I read that and it was like, okay, I get it, whatever. But then on my own, I was bored and I started experimenting with audiobooks. And it was that good of a book that I actually bought the hardcover, which was Jeffrey Gitomer's Little Red Book of Selling. But when I read that with his 12.5 principles, it was like, dude, I'm already doing every single one. Yeah, this is maybe a little bit more finer tuned, but I've done every single one of them. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got, and this actually goes into the next question that I wanted to ask you, was what's the best way to get more customers and, to get more leads? And the answer is free speech. Getting out there, speaking, going to your local community groups. It doesn't have to be the big stage. You go out there, you're speaking at a Chamber of Commerce event, let's say. Okay. People are going to already assume, well, he's vetted, he's got to be an expert or he won't be here. And it already gives you that blue check mark that you're validated. And if what you speak about, if you're in the right audience, I mean, you're going to have people coming to you, because I often view networking as almost like finding needles in a haystack. It's hard.
Sure.
And if you can turn that around to where you're speaking or hosting a podcast like Shark Bite Biz, then instead of looking for those little needles, you're bringing all those needles to you because they're listening to you and they know the expert you are. What do you think about that?
Correct. Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, just being known as an industry expert, it doesn't matter the field, automatically draws people to you. Right. If you put passion and energy into something like you might do with the podcast or your guitar playing, people naturally gravitate to you and want to come to you as that subject matter expert, which ultimately then leads to additional leads and connections and resources and what have you. I love wine. I have, one of the things we were able to do is my wife and I, boxed wine. Yes. Yeah, exactly. the big gallo jugs that you with the handle that you put your finger through.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, one of the fortunate things my wife and I have been able to do is put in a wine cellar in our house. And so, I enjoy wine. I like to partake of wine. I like to talk about wine. I like to shop for wine. I like to taste. And so people naturally, when they see you or when they see me kind of, talk about wine and see kind of just that enjoyment I get out of it, we'll be somewhere and they'll hear me talking. They'll be like, oh, well, what do you recommend for this? Or what do you think about that? Oh, yeah. I don't have a trained background in it, right? But it's a passion and it's something. And sort of the same thing you're talking about, being an expert, lending credibility to an industry or to being able to be known as something that you enjoy, naturally will bring in leads or contacts or opportunities or whatever you want to call it.
Now, how do you think, okay, so we've already talked about getting out there, speaking, and getting that type of exposure. Outside of that, what other ways is a sales rep able to broaden his image or her image, their image, to look like the true subject matter expert they are? Because here's an example. with our company, I'll use it because it's low hanging fruit for examples right now. With our company, if we have sales rep A, and maybe sales rep A has been in the business for 30 years, and people that work with that sales rep, like one of the best experts they know, but no one outside of that circle really knows who they are, outsiders looking in. Mm-hmm. How can you broaden that perception?
Well, I think it's about, to me, it's about content. So it's about getting information out, and sort of tying back to what you were saying before, which is being a subject matter expert, and having this podcast. Not everybody can have a podcast. Not everybody has David's time and energy to run a podcast, but it's really just about, I think, being an expert in your company. Being an expert for me, I've built relationships with consulting firms and individuals outside the company because I feel that if they can find the prospects that I can't get to, they're connected. And if you think of the world or the U.S. as this, and you think, let's say you have a territory of 8 or 9 states. It's almost impossible to recover all those states,
right?
Especially now, you're not flying, you're not communicating as well, being on site face to face. I've developed these contacts that are consultants in these industries and these areas, and they will bring us the opportunities. They'll bring me the opportunities and say, "Hey, I've got this. I think it's a good fit for you. It's a $150 million opportunity. What do you think?" And so it's kind of about putting, geographic individuals out there for you to kind of mine that and bring that back. That's the way I've approached it. Some of my biggest deals have been that way, rather than just trying to, incessantly, cold call, which unfortunately you can't. It's harder to do right now anyway.
Are you a fan? Even if, let's take the pandemic out. Cold calling. Are you a fan of modern day cold calling, or is that something that is of the past?
I think traditional cold calling, picking up a phone is, I think, dead. Even cold emailing or warm emailing or some sort of introductory email, outside of, letting a marketing team handle it, where you're blasting out, let's say 1,000, emails because you've done the data, you've mined the data, you've found out that these people fit this type of, geographic area and this type of business, and they've been busy on this website and they've contacted that. That's great. You have all the analytics there to be able to reach out to those people, and that's probably very efficient to send out, 1,000 emails that way. But the idea of, hey, you've got to dial so many people, 60 people a day,
right?
You've got to send out 60 emails a day. I think that, at least in this time of things, I think is a little bit of a thing of the past. I've never been very good at cold calling.
Nope.
Part of my first gig was inside sales calling, and I did okay, but it was generally very sporadic, and we didn't have data. It was literally pick up a phone and maybe this looks like a fit, maybe it doesn't, right? Based on a yellow page.
So my first sales job was doing Foot Locker when I was. Well, my first job was working in a restaurant dishwasher when I was 14. Second job was selling at Foot Locker. That was my first exposure to sales, and I killed it. I mean, that Foot Locker was also hot in the 90s too, so that made it really easy. But then my first real sales job where I had to do cold calling was a telemarketing job. I was 16, 17, and I am dialing for dollars for estimates on windows, siding, and sunrooms.
Sure. Wow.
And, it was cool. I was 17 and I made like $35,000. And that's when I realized, I got a little bit arrogant then too. Hey, who needs high school anymore? I'm making more than most adults do, working out here doing this. But that's really when it opened for me. Since that moment, I was not real fond of cold calling, and I've never been really good at it, except for that one moment in life that really broke me into getting into sales.
Yeah. Cold calling's tough, and I respect those people who've had to do it.
Yeah.
I was fortunate at a time when I was doing very, very well at that startup that I'd mentioned that went under for wire fraud.
Yeah.
we were spending a couple $100,000 a month on lead generation.
Yeah.
And I was being handed leads, hand over fist. And so it was constantly just running from one demonstration and call to another, back and forth, back. And I loved it because I was busy. But those people were dialing 70, 80 calls a day. And that is a lot of stress in anybody's book. So hats off to those people. But I think that certainly now, I think that is somewhat gone out the window. I just don't see how it's productive. Companies, you don't know if the company is viable. Two, you don't know what sort of financial state they're in. Three, who do you get in contact with? You can't dial in and say, hey, can I get the CFO? You have to go through LinkedIn, and then maybe you can find them through LinkedIn. You can find some back address or back phone number. And it's kind of the same thing with emailing. I think just prospectively dialing it via email or just sending out a blast of an email, on a one-on-one thing, it's just so unproductive. So I think having... Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what is the best way to prospect during COVID?
Yeah, I think it's relationships. I think it's all relationship driven. It's reaching out to those people that know people that have an ear to the ground, maybe in other areas. It's looking at, as we do, trying to find industries that have been successful and then being able to turn around and at least maybe target email that company or those companies and say, hey, we've done distribution for medical supplies very, very well, for example. So we have, I think, something that would fit your industry or fit what you're doing. We've been successful. We can help you improve processes.
Right.
We can help you become more efficient. That, I think, is probably right now the way to do it most efficiently and effectively.
Right. So I got two questions with that. The first one is, well, I guess it's not really a question, but I want your take on it, is that I think a lot of salespeople, they forget two things. They forget how powerful their network actually is. And by powerful, I mean that you have a lot of opportunities in your network just from either people themselves or connections to your connections, that they know you're an expert, that you'll take care of their friend. They're going to introduce you. But I think that sales reps, just like, how when you go through sales training and you're bringing someone on, you always go through the ask for the sale part.
Sure.
I think that applies here, that they forget to ask for the sale, meaning that they don't reach out to their network and stay in contact like, hey, bring your people, come to me, bring your friends to me. I'm going to take care of them. I mean, do you think that's true at all?
Yes, I do. And in fact, I can kind of give you some concrete examples of,
that'd be great.
Where things are at in terms of my world and what I've seen. So part of where we get sales from, or where I get sales from, has been from, the larger software company.
Right.
And in the past, we would get 3 or 4 leads a month, whatever it might be. And they were semi-qualified leads. But you never quite knew what was going to be coming down the pipe. That pipe has dried up, right? So that I might get one every 3 months, 2 to 3 months. I think I've had, maybe if I average it out. So that resource is off the table, right? The leads that I have received from them have been, somewhat weak, somewhat scattered. What has been there has been my network, right? And if I look at, where I've been the last, call it 3 years, top sales guy at Vision33.
Only because I moved to management. Just let it slide, Jeff. Let it slide. Let it slide.
If you want to believe that. But top salesperson the last 2-3 years.
There you
go. 4 years, whatever it's been. That has really come from my business has come from my book of my relationships. And it's those people that I've networked with and that I've built the relationships for me that have seen me as a valid resource, a trusted resource, somebody who's going to take care of their prospects, someone who knows that if they bring us into the deal, they're going to get straight answers. They're going to get, they're not going to get a line, and that the research will be done to make sure it's a good fit. I'm not going to bring myself into a deal if I don't think it's going to be good for the customer.
Yeah.
Right. And valid for the customer. So that's where my business has come from. My big deals 3 years ago through relationships, 2 years ago through relationships, last year through relationships. This year I've sold smaller deals that have, as I mentioned earlier, been more targeted, more focused by the company. So it's been more about, the trustworthiness that I've provided. But there's 3 or 4 deals right now that I've been brought into that are massive deals that have been brought to me through my relationships with consulting firms. And they say, hey, we've got a fit for this. We think you'd be a fit. You tell me, we want to bring you in. Yes, let's go. Let's talk about it.
Okay. So sidetrack, you just said that you're getting a lot more smaller deals. Now, with the pandemic, whether it's the pandemic, a recession, whatever it is, there's always companies that just go through the roof during those time periods because they have something that's needed. So with the pandemic, you have a lot of smaller companies, I think, that maybe got overnight success in a way because, they were doing 100 orders a week online, but because of everything that's happened, now they're doing 1,000 orders a week online, and it's actually excelled their need for digital transformation, whether that be ERP, a Salesforce, whatever it is, the tools in their belt. I mean, is that what you're seeing as well too?
Yeah, I am. One is related to biotechnology, right? And so kind of the COVID response. And while they don't necessarily have a focus of that wasn't the industry they were going down, they deal with genetic manipulation. So being able to look at that and say, okay, we've got genes, we can naturally turn that into some sort of a COVID response. That's one of the things that's come up. The others have been distribution through natural organic products and or distribution of supplies, kind of dealing to that. So it's been those specific verticals. It hasn't been necessarily things that are outside like food production or something like that. I mean, although that could be part of it, it has been focused. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing a much more driven, focused approach from the customer's perspective to acquiring product than I had in the past.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'd be this scattered shot where you'd be like, well, we don't really know.
Right.
Now we know, hey, we've got to do something.
Because they're feeling the pain.
We're struggling.
They're feeling specific pains because of the growth that they're achieving now. So, now that's pretty cool. I've got 2 wrap-up questions here because we do got to get heading out. This has been such a great conversation. LinkedIn, you mentioned LinkedIn a few minutes ago. Do you feel, just as people are having Zoom fatigue, there's a LinkedIn fatigue? I could tell you I'm being hit up more than ever.
Yeah. I do. And LinkedIn to me has been sort of this, I hate to say it, sort of almost a forced communication method where you have to participate. If you don't, you might be seen as a bad salesperson or a bad business person, right? But I don't know if I've really ever clearly pulled. I can think of actually one deal that I kind of brought myself into that I won probably 2 or 3 years ago. That's probably 3 years ago. That was related to Zoom, where I found out the CFO's name and I was able to reach out to them through LinkedIn and connect and say, hey, FYI, I know that there's this RFP coming down. We're going to participate. I want you to know that I'm actually local to where you live. I'm from the town from where you're at. So it's really important to me that we participate. And I think I could really, make your business hum. That's probably been the one successful thing that got me a deal, was sort of that building that relationship with the CFO. Outside of that, a lot of what you get, if you get a response, maybe it's 1 out of 10 times, you might get I'm not interested, thanks. So all the communication platforms and methods like that are, I think, at least in this day and age, have kind of, in a way, worn themselves out. Just, again, reaching out and trying to not spam, but just cold blast somebody because they're in an industry or because they're at a company. I think it's easier almost nowadays to go back to the original form of sales, or at least maybe it will be once we kind of get there, which is a little bit more of that, just stop in and do an introduction of yourself, right? Kind of put yourself out there and make yourself more personable and more personal and not a robot. I have to go through this process. Right. I'm not a robot. Exactly. So if it's this.
That's really interesting that you say that, because my strategy, and this has been my strategy for like ever. Okay. I'll have LinkedIn, a lot of connections, and I'm connected with people, but I don't think that's really a good place, maybe to get an intro, but not to really build a deep relationship. So when there is somebody, and this could be a customer or it could be, more than likely it's going to be a partner of some sorts, a referral partner, somebody that I can think of like, hey, we could actually be friends and we have some business synergy. I get them onto my Facebook account because I want them to know me, the individual David Strausser.
Interesting.
You see my family, you know, to know like, hey, this dude's legit. He knows what he's talking about. He's, you know, pretty transparent. And that's been my strategy. Have you done that at all? To that degree?
Not to the degree you have, but you brought up something I think is very important, and that's the transparency. And I think just, you know, being, you know, as I mentioned, being open and just being, you know, forthcoming what your intentions are. It's almost like, you know, you're going to go on the first date and you have to go meet the parents. And so it's almost that old school approach where you're like, you know, here's my intentions for tonight. Here's what I would like to, you know, I'd like to take, you know, your son or daughter to. This is what what we're going to do, and sort of put that trustworthiness, you know, onto the parents. Like, okay, great, good person. I want them to see me as this person that they can trust. They can feel that I have their best intent, because ultimately that's going to, you know, we talk about relationships. That's going to drive more business to you down the road, right? If it's a snake oil approach, you might get a deal, but then they're going to blast other people and say, oh my goodness, I can't imagine that. For those people, for example, like real estate or automobiles, where you are selling, you're selling yourself as much you are a product. And I guess that's true to the case for any sales. But, you know, I think about, you know, real estate, where that transaction you have with that one buyer can drive so many more, 3, 4, 5 additional clients, right? It's all about that relationship in that industry. And it really needs to be the same, I think, in any sort of sales.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Definitely.
It's not,
and word travels faster now. So if you're not a true salesperson, like telling the truth, you do a little bit of snake oil, something shady, that word's going to travel pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Know? Absolutely. Everybody, you know, it's that, what's the old adage where they say, you know, for every one good, you know, review you get, there's probably 10 others that are negative that don't post, right? So if you know you get that one, you know there are others out there that are not necessarily positive. You want to try to reduce that, you know, that difference, right? You want the 10 positive and the one negative. You want to turn that around. So, and I think that's where ultimately relationships and you know, trying to not necessarily just be, you know, the sales guy, but try to be the person first is ultimately, I think, the best approach for anything. Definitely. Right. And
so we do got to get rolling. I have one last open-ended question for you. What words of advice do you have for small business owners, sales executives out there that are struggling to adopt with the digital transformation that's needed for them to actually close deals?
Yeah, I think for those companies out there, find a trusted advisor. Find a company that you or a person you feel that you can work with and learn from. There's a lot of resources, and unfortunately, a lot of the resources out there, it's almost like, you know, political jargon, in that you're going to hear so many different things. Half of, you know, a quarter of which is probably accurate. The rest is probably not. You know, for businesses, I would say, you know, get out there, find, you know, talk to people, find some trusted resources. I don't know, because it seems like every independent, you know, resource outside of maybe a few individuals probably are not really independent, right? So it's all about sort of a marketing slant. But get out there and just and talk to someone, right? Get someone that you can understand, that you feel has your best intent at heart and can give you some guidance. I know it sounds weird at heart, but you know, if you're going to buy a car, you want to go buy a car from the person that seems to be the most knowledgeable, not the guy that's saying, hey, what's it going to take to get your business today, right? So it's kind of that same thing. You don't want to buy necessarily for someone who's like, hey, I've got a deal and this deal is the best deal in the world, and you have to buy in the next, where are we at, the 20-something right now, in the next 7 days. If you don't, the deal is gone, right? You don't want that. You want hey, the group, the company. And I think for software, I think that's part of the reason I've stayed at Vision33 has been, It's not necessarily about timelines and deadlines. Yes, there are deals to be had, but it's never been about that. It's always been, hey, when you're ready to buy, if we've got the right product, we'd love to sell it to you.
Right.
Yes,
You don't want to push them away as well, too. That's what I think you have to remember, because there's so many people out of necessity right now. They're pushing so hard to try to close deals. And realistically, they're pushing them away, where it's like, hey, look, if you can wait, another week, you're going to get it. It's really hard because you have to balance getting them off the street, getting the deal closed, because anything could happen the longer it lingers out there, but you have to have that relationship.
You brought up a point earlier in which you said, hey, you try to backload the deal and you say, right, well, if your goal is this date, there's my hand on there. If the goal is this date, you have to be able to start here, because if you don't start on this date, then you're not going to get your timeline. So we know what that ultimate timeline is. Okay, I don't really care what order we do things in here in the middle, but we ultimately know there's a date, a drop dead date that we have to hit. I don't care if it's this month, next month, or the month after that. We just want you to get to that date, and we want you to feel comfortable with who we are. I think ultimately for the sales guy, you asked a question about how does a salesperson kind of go through this. I think it's just more so about, there's so much kind of in the environment, right? Everything from murder hornet bees to what I hear the other day about vampire bats possibly coming to fires and, hurricanes and COVID. And it's such a stressful time for companies and stressful for most salespeople. Just be that kind, honest salesperson that you can be, where you know that the business is going through a lot, you're going through a lot. Be open and honest, and I think that's ultimately probably the best approach for anybody.
That's solid words of advice from Mr. Jeff Strand. Jeff, how can all our fabulous viewers get in touch with you?
You can reach me phone. Well, do I want to give my phone number? Email is probably best.
Go with email.
In this case, email probably is best. You can do jeffstrand@yahoo.com. That's my personal first name, last name @yahoo.com. Ultimately, for those that are kind of involved with the Vision33 side or on the software side here, jeff.strand@vision33.com.
And
also.
I'll make sure in the descriptions on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, everywhere we are, we'll have it right there. And you're going to get so much spam mail. You're going to love me.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I love it.
You need more spam mail in your Yahoo account, right?
If it's for deals on wine, I'll be probably very happy.
There you go. There we go. Hey, Jeff, this was great. I would love to have you back here maybe 6 months from now, 3 months, 6 months, something like that.
Absolutely.
Let's see what the new normal in sales looks like then and talk about the differences from now.
If we all survive COVID, and we're not, the nice thing about this is we're mask free. I feel like I can communicate with someone without a mask on, which is absolutely great.
It is. You should do more podcast interviews with me.
I know I should, David. It's been great.
Pleasure. I'll talk to you later. Take care, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So how many deals did you close during the course of that interview? Sales never sleeps, right? Jeff is an amazing character, as I said earlier. I really love talking with him on his insight on sales and strategy and all that good stuff. And I look forward to also bringing many more sales experts in on this Shark Bite Biz podcast over the next few months to talk about the sales process as a whole, but at a much detailed level as we get into the new norm of what this post coronavirus life is going to look like. Any sales rep or business executive out there will tell you, I mean, you all already know communication is key. Communication is also one of the hardest hit things right now. I mean, you can email, you can shoot a text message, but you all know they get taken out of context or misconstrued so easily. You say one thing where they think that you mean another thing, and bam, you're losing a deal or on the brinks of losing a deal. It's kind of tough. And now, instead of doing the in-person meet and greets, I mean, we're doing video chats. And your customers, maybe they don't fire up their cameras. Maybe they're one of those audio only type people. And let's be truthful. I mean, it's really hard to replicate that in-person meet and greet feel, giving them the same warm and fuzzies as when you're on site or in a restaurant or a bar or a show or wherever you're at with your contact. It's hard to replicate that over a cold video chat. It's hard to make that cold video chat warmer. God forbid you get somebody on the call that doesn't know how to use the darn mute button. It's like, my God, it's 2020. You press the button, you're muted. You unpress the button, you're unmuted. Some people just don't get it. And, it surprises me, but people are getting better with it. It's not too bad. I guess maybe a couple years ago it'd probably be worse, but you still run into it, and it makes me chuckle every time I see it. What really drives me nuts is when you get people, their videos or their audio is just cutting out because they have really bad home internet quality. And that really just stinks because you're trying to do a sales pitch and it's like, the people are, that's the hardest. And, if they're muting or dropping out every 10 seconds, I mean, that is challenging. How do you get around that to be able to sell the deal? If you were in person, you never would have had to deal with those challenges. And you've got to think about it from the sales rep perspective, okay? You're a sales rep. You go out, you're selling a product. Eventually, after you demo, you usually run into the rebuttal phase of everything. And that's where it's like, I don't like this, or so-and-so said that, and blah, blah, blah. You get into that phase of the game. And when you get into that phase of the game, I mean, you kind of have to think, communication is just part of this too. It's one of those gaps that you're going to have to bridge. You're going to have to figure out, how can you make communication not a challenge in this sales cycle? How can you get past this without making, oh my God, we've got to do another video chat with this guy. It's, you don't want to be dreading it. Use it for your key. And it's hard because everybody's technological skill set varies. And then maybe they're really good at Zoom, but you're using Microsoft Teams or, God forbid, Skype for Business or something like that, and they're not good. There's always a learning curve, and it's just tough. But I mean, you all get it though too. But on top of that, I mean, you have to be more conscious of your customer as well too. You have to know your customer and build that personal relationship. That's going to help you try to eliminate some of these communication hurdles that you're going to run into. You also got to be more conscious of your customer too. Maybe their business doing great, but perhaps their work from life home is not doing good. Maybe it's just really stressful for them. There's a lot of things going on, and it could just be that they're just very distracted because their kids keep talking to them. There is a million X factors out there, and that's why I really think sales these days, if you could sum it up in one word, it's going to be patience. You need to have the patience to figure out the communication hurdles, the work from home hurdles, all these new challenges that you didn't have before, so that you could build the warm and fuzzies with your customer. Understanding those are going to be really the key of closing deals, I think, right now. And then, a lot of other stuff, like Jeff was saying, as far as, your voice tone, stuff like that. That all goes into play. That comes into being conscious of your customer and really having the patience to figure out how to understand them. So that was a great chat with Jeff, right? I love talking with Jeff about sales and sales philosophy, and it's really one of my favorite items to discuss with him. So what do you think? How have you changed your sales methodology to account for all those X factors out there that we are all experiencing during the pandemic? Leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Let's discuss. Let's get some good conversation going. I'd love to hear what you all are doing. And please make sure you all visit our Shark Bite Biz store on Teespring. You can find the link down in the description of the video. And we've got some awesome gear there, like this wonderful coffee mug. We've got some shirts, sweatshirts, doggy sweaters. Everybody wants a doggy sweater. Make sure you get it there. You're going to help out the channel. But if you really want to help out the channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit that like button, and do me a favor. This week, the challenge, let's share this video as much as we can out there on LinkedIn. Make everybody aware of Shark Bite Biz and how we're helping businesses grow during this global pandemic. So thank you all again for watching. My name is David Strausser. This is Shark Bite Biz, and I'll see you again next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.